The weather is going to be very active over the next 24 to 48 hours as several complexes of severe storms will be impacting the United States, including areas like the Great Plains, the Midwest, and the Ohio Valley, where damaging winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes will all be possible. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather over the next couple of days, in addition to the overall threat of a potential for a tropical storm as we go into this weekend, and as well as next week near Florida. Now, we are going to first begin with what's happening across the United States as of this morning, and overall the weather is actually pretty active depending on where you are. We do have a complex of thunderstorms that's developed over Iowa last night. This brought some hail and wind to parts of central Iowa. That is actually all moving down to the southeast as a complex of thunderstorms, and that'll impact areas like Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Kentucky, and Tennessee later on today, and we're going to talk more details on that here in just a minute. Over in the southeast United States, pretty typical for what we've been seeing the last couple of weeks. Pretty active. We've had some showers, some thunderstorms. We actually had a pretty large complex of thunderstorms here that is all pretty much weakened out at this point, but it moved through areas like Tennessee, Kentucky, and Indiana yesterday. We did actually see a tornado back over just to the northeast of Evansville yesterday, right around about 7 o'clock or so. So obviously that's something to keep in mind, but overall that activity has now fizzled out at this point. And then really the area that we are going to be talking about the most over the next 24 to 48 hours will be across the central, northern plains, and as well as the Midwest, and this will eventually all move into the Ohio Valley as we go into Thursday. So an active stretch of weather, at least for the next 48 hours, is ahead as we continue to see a northwesterly flow that is continuing to bring lines of thunderstorms across a large chunk of the Great Plains and as well as the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, with significant damaging winds being possible both today and as well as tomorrow. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential for the next few days, and we'll begin with today, which is Wacky Weather Wednesday. We do have a very large area that we're going to be watching today for at least a low threat for severe weather. There is a marginal threat that goes all the way back over into the mid-Atlantic region and the southeast, including Georgia, even goes into Texas and Oklahoma today, which is not something you see too often for even the end of July. Our main area, though, that we're watching today will be two different areas, but it's obviously all combined into one. But we have a large slight risk of severe weather that goes from the northern and central plains back into areas like Tennessee and Kentucky, but this will kind of be broken down into two different parts. We're going to be dealing with a line of thunderstorms this afternoon and even into the early evening across parts of North Dakota, South Dakota, back into Kansas and Nebraska. That'll eventually move into areas like Iowa and eventually into parts of Illinois. But we're also going to have that other complex of storms ongoing this morning, which will be eventually going into the afternoon hours, moving across areas like Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and eventually Tennessee. Now, the main concern for today will be damaging winds. We have a hatched area in place right now across parts of the northern and central plains and as well as Iowa, where there could be damaging winds that exceed 70 miles per hour. So make sure that you're hatching down trampolines, protecting loose line items, as there will definitely be the potential here for some scattered damaging winds across parts of the northern and central plains and the Midwest. And there also is an elevated hail risk, which will exist across parts of South Dakota, Minnesota, and Nebraska, where we could end up seeing some hailstones that exceed 2 inches in diameter today. So be mindful of that. Protect your vehicle. We could even see some hail up to the size of apples, which will definitely be destructive in nature. Now, today's tornado risk, it is not super high. It's basically the same as it has been for the last several days. It is on the very low side of things. We have a large 2% tornado risk from South Dakota and Nebraska back into Kentucky. But I want you to know that I would not be surprised if we do see some sort of 5% tornado risk somewhere maybe in eastern Nebraska, western Iowa, or even southeast South Dakota sometime today. I wouldn't be surprised if they do upgrade that, depending on what the convective trends look like as we go later into the morning. If storms are more linear, I think it'll probably just stay as a 2%, but if we have any chance of there being discrete supercells, I do think this will get upgraded to a 5% tornado risk in at least a couple areas there where we might see the potential for maybe even a couple of tornadoes out of those initial storms. Now, once we go into tossing trampolines on tall trees Thursday, the risk for severe weather will shift further to the east across parts of the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Mid-Atlantic region, with the main corridor currently forecasted to be in Illinois, Indiana, and as well as Ohio. The main concern as we go into tomorrow will be damaging winds. There will also be a potential for some large hail, but the risk is relatively low. And then the tornado risk in general is going to be low, but it's not zero. And the main area that we're going to be watching for that threat will be central and southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, northwest Indiana, and eastern Iowa. Now, the plan is right now we'll probably be live today if it looks concerning enough. And if we do go live, it will not be until after 2 o'clock, as I do have an appointment today that I have to go to. Fun fact. And then also as we go into Thursday, we might be live depending on what it looks like as we go into Thursday, possibly for this tornado risk in the Midwest. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel down below. Now, today's tornado risk, in my opinion, will predominantly be right around lunchtime and into the early to mid-afternoon hours. So what we're going to be watching for today, look back to the west over here, back over in like Minnesota and South Dakota. I think overall, right around lunchtime, we'll be looking at least at a low-end tornado risk, and if any storms can stay discreet, there could be a bit more of an elevated tornado risk. As we go later into the afternoon, that's when I think it becomes a bit more concerning when it comes to population density, which is why we would go live if we do today. It would be more because of that, because we'll be dealing with the potential for an isolated tornado or two near that leading edge of the storms across parts of northwest Iowa, southern Minnesota, and eastern Nebraska. And as we go into the evening and into the overnight hours, the tornado threat is very low to zero. So good news is that this tornado risk today will be mostly during the daylight hours across the Central Plains and as well as the Midwest. Here's what we're looking at for timing. We're going to go region by region, beginning with the northern plains for today. This morning, we'll be likely looking at a mesoscale convective system that is probably already developing right now across North and South Dakota. And then once we go later into the afternoon, this is going to continue to move eastbound. And if we get any storms that can go discrete near the, this leading edge or even just around it, those could produce a bit more of an elevated tornado risk. Now, in general today, I think it's going to be mostly damaging winds. Again, that's contingent on this being mostly linear. If anything does go discrete, which means a storm is basically separated from that line of thunderstorms, I would not be surprised if we get some sort of rogue tornado threat going later today. As we go later into the afternoon, around 2 to 3 o'clock, storms are moving into Minnesota and as well as very far northwestern Iowa. Now, again, the location of this line of storms could very well vary. It could be further south or north. Again, mesoscale features like this are hard to predict, so today's threat of severe weather is not an easy, slam dunk when it comes to forecasting. This could definitely be somewhere else, but what you want to keep in mind is that scattered to numerous damaging winds will be possible throughout the afternoon, and then once we go into the evening hours, those storms are moving across Iowa, which they'll probably get pretty messy by then, as mostly a wind threat as we go into the overnight hours across parts of the Midwest. This is what the Central Plains look like for today. So right around lunchtime, storms firing up mainly in South Dakota. A couple will try to get going in Nebraska, but I think Nebraska and Kansas threat will be more geared towards the mid to late afternoon and into the evening hours as a line of thunderstorms. Will it live that long? I'm not sure. It might go through Kansas City. It might not. If it does, damaging winds would be the main concern. If it kind of falls apart like the HRRR model is showing as it goes into Iowa, it would be mostly just an isolated damaging wind threat, and it should avoid the Kansas City metro area. Once we go into the overnight hours, this kind of again falls apart as it goes in the Midwest, where it could try to reorganize into another mesoscale convective system in the Midwest. Now, here's what the timing looks like in the Midwest for today. So again, we'll have that area of storms ongoing this morning across Iowa, Illinois, and maybe even parts of Missouri. This will probably continue even through the afternoon across Indiana. It should be mostly just an isolated damaging wind threat, maybe a brief tornado, but I'm not really concerned about the tornado risk out of this activity. It'll be very similar to what we saw yesterday. So if you were anywhere in these areas yesterday in like Indiana, Illinois, or Kentucky, it'll be almost identical to what we saw yesterday when it comes to just the pure severe weather threat being damaging winds. Once we go later into the evening, we'll be watching for that area of storms back over into Iowa, which will be our next mesoscale convective system. It'll produce the potential for damaging winds as this moves across Iowa and Wisconsin. It should be relatively weak. This will be mostly overnight tonight, meaning that it's going to be mostly after you're sleeping, so make sure that you have ways to receive alerts. But overall, it'll be mostly just rumbles of thunder, heavy rainfall, and then maybe some damaging winds. And then as we go into Thursday morning, this will eventually move into parts of Kentucky and perhaps even another mesoscale convective system developing in Illinois, which could lead to more damaging winds as we go into Thursday, which we'll talk more about here in just a second. Here's what the Ohio Valley looks like for today. So again, notice that line of storms this afternoon and evening crashing along Kentucky. It'll eventually fizzle a bit more as it goes into Tennessee, and just after sunset, this falls apart as it moves towards Georgia and as well as North Carolina, hence why we have that slight risk for severe weather for today. And the tornado risk in the Midwest as we go into Thursday is going to be very interesting. These are the tornado parameter values. Overall, they're very low, meaning that the tornado risk should stay low, at least you would think, but the setup is very interesting because we're going to be having a little spinning area as we go into Thursday afternoon. That's your low pressure system that could spawn a few storms near the low, and these will be capable of potentially a few tornadoes. I wouldn't even be surprised if we have a small scale tornado outbreak here in the Midwest on Thursday. The good news about this is that a lot of these tornadoes and a lot of these setups, usually when we have like a low pressure system like this, usually the tornado threat is predominantly just small and brief tornadoes. But it is going to be interesting to see how Thursday plays out. As long as this stays as forecasted, we could have an interesting day on Thursday here in the Midwest, and it might require a live stream here on the channel. Also, back over in the Ohio Valley for Thursday, again, notice that line of storms moving across areas like Indiana, eventually into Kentucky. As we go into the afternoon, we could see a couple rounds of thunderstorms, again, damaging winds being the main concern. And for now, it is a slight risk for damaging winds tomorrow, but I wouldn't be surprised if confidence grows, we might see that upgraded to some sort of small enhanced risk, maybe in like southern Illinois or something like that. I do want to quickly point out the tropical system that might develop as we go into this weekend near Florida. Right now, the European model has it sitting just offshore as a tropical depression, perhaps developing into a tropical storm as we go into Monday near the Carolinas. And as it hugs along that Bermuda high, this could intensify actually as it moves closer to areas like Nova Scotia. So right now, it's something to watch for. Not really too concerned about this for the United States, unless for some weird reason this decides to take a turn into the Gulf of Mexico. It's a very low chance that happens at this point. It's something we're monitoring, but right now I'm not concerned about this. No reason to be panicking. Just stay weather aware if you're down near the Gulf Coast or anywhere along the East Coast of the United States. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.